I have a disclaimer to start with. I kind of drifted away from my initial title, but I hope it will be nonetheless interesting. So I'll start. So as the conqueror of Egypt and its first Muslim governor, Āmr ibn al-As played a crucial role in both the country's everyday life and its political sphere. His unique position as a top official and military leader meant that Āmr mediated between and had to deal with the caliph in Medina, the soldier in the field, and the newly subjugated native population. In a letter to Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, he announced the conquest of Alexandria in the following manner, and I quote, "I have conquered a city in which there are 4,000 luxuries with 4,000 baths and 40,000 Jews," end quote. His remarkable achievement, however, quickly turned into an intense dispute within the Muslim camp. Āmr's soldiers did not agree with the covenant signed by their leader and demanded what they regarded as their fair share of the booty, i.e., the distribution of spoils and lands among them. They cited the precedent set by the Prophet Muhammad in Khaybar to support their claim. In Khaybar, the Prophet Muhammad divided the booty into parts and after taking 1/5 to himself, distributed it among those who participated in the battle. Āmr thus found himself in a complicated situation. Should he break the covenant he recently signed with the people of Alexandria, or should he go against his own soldiers' will, risking their resentment and possible mutiny? He decided to consult with ʿUmar, the caliph, who instructed him to leave the lands in the hands of the community, rather than divide it among the soldiers. Thus, he diverged from the practice as it was set by the Prophet himself. This decision greatly affected several social groups: the Muslim army, the caliph in Medina, the Muslim community, and the local population who get to keep their lands. In this lecture, I focus on different ways that the two groups, the state or the empire, I do agree with this terminology better, and the soldiers experienced the change in practice, what this change meant for them, how they reacted to it, and how it was implemented. It is important to note that it was not a singular, unique event, as the same question has been submitted to ʿUmar from the province of the Sawad. The case in question symbolizes one of the greatest shifts in mentality in early Islam, the shift from maghazi, raids, to futuh, conquests. At some point during their military campaigns, and under ʿUmar's stewardship, the Muslims appear to have developed a new way of thinking, more fitting a sedentary empire than a nomadic tribal rule. In other words, sometime during their military campaigns and following their overwhelming success, they decided to settle the newly conquered territories and rule it, rather than merely continue raiding them for booty. This, in turn, brought about the formation of administrative practices and institutions of ruling previously unknown to the Muslims. The extensive conquests thus triggered the establishment of various institutions, as well as a process of adopting and adapting government and administrative patterns and practices found in the recently conquered regions, particularly in the two empires they had captured, the Sasanian and Byzantine. The first side here is the state, represented by ʿUmar. It is possible that the remarkable change in mentality reflected in his actions and words suggests a great interest in extracting tax revenues from the conquered lands. In one account, his reply to Āmr is recorded as following, and I think you have handouts, I don't know if they've been handing out. Anyways, I'll read it. It's the first text over there, number 1. And the people disagreed with Āmr about their shares. Most of the people wanted a share of Alexandria. Āmr said, "I cannot decide on their shares until I write to the commander of the faithful." He wrote to him telling him of its conquest and its situation, and he told him that the Muslims sought a share of it. ʿUmar wrote to him, "Do not divide Alexandria. Leave it alone, and the Kharaj will be the fight for the Muslims and a force for them in the jihad of their enemy." End quote. This account presents ʿUmar as an agent of change. He has already adopted the mentality of an empire ruler, preferring long-term tax revenues over immediate gains. It describes the development of a taxation system over booty raiding. Booty is a one-time act in which the raiders take everything they can get their hands on. then distribute it solely among themselves. Taxation, on the other hand, is a long-lasting mechanism in which the state determines the amount levied, then collects it and distributes it among the entire community. Collecting the taxes requires an apparatus of land service, censuses, tax collectors, and administrators. Unlike booty, it provides the state with a reliable long-term income, allowing it to develop and supply other needs. Thus, ʿUmar's decision to shift from booty to taxation is evidence of the new state of mind of the Muslim evolving state. In the case discussed here, the equation may be presented as such. Moving from booty to taxation equals the shifting from maghazi to futur. ʿUmar's long-term perspective, evident in his decision to settle the land, is also attested to by the reasons he gives for keeping the land as state lands, open quote, so that the descendants of the descendants may profit by it, end quote. ʿUmar preferred income in perpetuity for the good of the whole Muslim community. This is important enough to him that he revokes a precedent set by the Prophet Muhammad, an act that must not have been easy to carry off and required a significant amount of power. Interestingly, al-Ṭabarī also mentions that he does so after taking the advice of Ali over other companions. This is a side note. But, as I have described, ʿUmar's wishes did not coincide with those of the soldiers. Booty was a major incentive for soldiers to join military campaigns. In several cases, soldiers cited directly as the reason for their participation in battles. In one case, they even complain about the commander who refrains from battle, accusing him of denying them their due spoils. In the battles preceded Alexandria, soldiers were accustomed to collect the booty, and after sending certain shares of it back to Medina, divided it among themselves. This was also accompanied by the allocation of land to soldiers. In the case of Alexandria too, they are said to have urged ʿAmr into battle while he negotiated peace with the people of Alexandria. And this is the second text that you have. I quote, "We will not give them anything of the arbitration nor the jizya until God conquers for us, so that all the land will become ours as plunder and booty, as the fortress and what was in it becomes ours." End quote. Here, ʿAmr is put in a precarious position too, and here too, he serves as ʿUmar's agent, rebuffing the soldiers' demands by citing the wish of the commander of the faithful. In this case, however, he also mentions the flooding of the Nile as a reason not to fight, arguing that it will make the conquest impossible. Since we can assume that the soldiers were aware of the floods, it is not inconceivable that ʿAmr was using a strategy of mediation to appease them. In the Sawat, also, some of the soldiers pushed for the division of the lands, but there, the majority of the warriors rejected it, helping the Muslim official to implement the new custom. It shows that soldiers is by no means a monolithic category or body of people, and that within the Muslim army, people acted in different ways to the changing reality. Although the sources do not mention any mutinies, violent actions, or overt resentment after ʿUmar's letter reached Alexandria, this does not mean that everything went smoothly. Al-Zubayr, which is a very prominent Muslim in early Islam, and another military commander who led a force of 12,000 men into Egypt. ʿAmr's army, when he enters Egypt, is estimated in about 3,500 soldiers. So Al-Zubayr is said to have sided with the soldiers in this dispute. Indeed, he is reported as the only man who eventually received lands in Egypt following the event and retired there peacefully. This method of negotiation, i.e. giving powerful figures a share of the land of booty, was also implemented by ʿUmar in a similar case, in the Sawat, where he handed out free gifts to some Medinian figures, and in another case, negotiated with a woman unwilling to give up her share. This goes to show that there was a range of ways to negotiate, of course depending on the power of the negotiator. Also, it demonstrates that the changes advanced by ʿUmar were contested by prominent figures in Muslim society, albeit not very strongly. The fact that the conquered lands remained in the hands of the state did not prevent the soldiers from looking for alternative income. First, by this time, they were already part of the Diwan system, the stipend system, which may explain why they did not fiercely protest Omar's decision. Second, Amruz ordered that the dwellings supplied to the Muslim conquerors by the locals as part of the covenant's provisions would be used only for a short period of time. Muslims were not allowed to own the dwellings or rent them out for money, suggesting that Amruz's act here is against existing practices. Third, shortly after the conquest of Alexandria, Omar banned the cultivation of lands by Muslims. This appears to indicate that soldiers had enough money from previous conquests or from the Diwan to purchase lands in Egypt. In other case, Amr threatens to execute a soldier who sowed his crops, but eventually Omar pardoned this soldier. Omar's ban of cultivation was probably due to several reasons. First, he wanted to create a more professional army composed of full-time soldiers. Owning land and the need to tend to it would have been a distraction from military campaigns. Moreover, through the ban, Omar may have also tried to cement the soldiers' dependence on their state stipends and to block alternative competing income. Omar cites it as a direct reason in one case, and this is the last text in the handout, and I quote, "As for the lands and the camels, leave them in the hands of those men who work them, so that they may be included in the stipends, pensions of the Muslims. If you divide them among them, those present, nothing will be left for those comes after them." End quote. In addition, Omar wanted to keep the local inhabitants in their places, forestalling possible discontent. This also assured better cultivation of the land by those familiar with the land and its crops. So I'll get to the conclusions. So in conclusion, the conquest of Alexandria reveals the tensions that arose between different groups and persons regarding the change in their own and the land status. It highlights Omar as an agent of change, implementing new ideas and practices in the army. Although they did not actively endorse the change, the soldiers opted not to go against the caliph and sought out alternative sources of income. Amr serves as a mediator between the caliph and the soldiers, mostly siding with Omar and implementing his instructions. Change and continuity were not limited to the social and fiscal institutions of the local population. While the majority of the population in the conquered territories might not experience dramatic changes, and perhaps it will be a good place to discuss later, in their everyday life under the new rule, the same cannot be said for the conquerors themselves. They encountered many questions and dilemmas previously unfamiliar to them, such as how to treat the subjugated population and how to tax new lands. It is also important to note that the Muslim society itself was still a young, evolving one at the time. As such, it was in the midst of an ongoing process of consolidation within a framework of change and continuity. As the story of Alexandria suggests, this process of consolidation was hardly a clean, smooth transition from one point to another. Different groups perceived the nascent empire in varied, sometimes contradictory ways, had different interests and acted upon them in diverse ways.